speech. The last thing you need is another speech, and I'm here to fill your need. Not true, not true. I'm here to give the benediction. Bob Baker was supposed to do that, but Bob is a Methodist. And after George W. Bush, God sends all Methodist prayers to junk mail. You're fortunate you have the Baptist to plead your cause. You will be out in 5 minutes. I have 2 things to say. First, I'm here because of my friend and colleague, Adelaide Gomer Hart. We met 10 years ago. I was scheduled to speak at the Environmental Grantmakers Association in Minnesota on the impact of money in politics, one of my regular beats in television. Then the terrorists struck on 9/11 and PBS asked us to go on the air with a daily broadcast. I thought of canceling that speech. It just didn't seem right to be talking about money and politics while the country was still in mourning. But I began to notice some items in the news that struck me as especially repugnant amid all the grief. In Washington, where Common Cause, environmentalists, and other public interest advocates had suspended normal political activity, corporate lobbyists were suddenly mounting a full court press for special favors at taxpayer expense. There was no black crepe hanging on the windows of K Street, which, as all of you know, is the predatory epicenter of Washington. Visions of new-found gold danced in the heads of mercenary lobbyists. And in corporate suites across the country, CEOs were waking up to the prospect of a bonanza born of tragedy. Within 2 weeks of 9/11, the business press was telling of corporate directors rushing to give bargain-priced stock options to their top executives. Stocks had fallen sharply after the attacks, reaching a low on the 21st of September. Families of 9/11 victims were still waiting for some piece of flesh or bone to confirm the loss of a loved one. Soldiers might be loading their gear for deployment to strange battlefields. Corporate executives were too busy counting their shekels to care. As stock option grants executives the right to buy shares at that low price for years to come, the lower the price when options are awarded, the more lucrative they become. And all across the country, there was a great gold rush to lower stock options. In the words of the old Italian proverb, since the house is on fire, let us warm ourselves. Translated to English, it reads, grab the loop and run. During the final days of September, 10 years ago, 511 top executives at 186 companies gobbled up their stock option grants, more than twice as many in comparable periods in recent years. According to the Wall Street Journal, one company had begun laying off employees just hours before the terrorists struck. The chairman, nonetheless, helped himself to 602,589 options. President Bush had already urged us to prove our patriotism by going shopping. Mayor Giuliani went on television to say, let's step up to the plate and show the strength of the American economy, not the strength of the American spirit, not the strength of the American resolve, not the spirit of the American soul, but the spirit of the American economy. He would himself soon be heading toward a private fortune, exploiting his newfound celebrity, advising corporations on how to protect against terrorism. And in Washington, the marionettes of the military-industrial complex salivated at the prospect of windfall profits rising from the smoldering ruins of the World Trade Center. Grief would prove no match for greed. So I decided not to cancel the speech, and flew out to Minnesota to keep my commitment to the environmental grant makers. Adelaide was there. We had not met. She came up to me after the speech and said, "We must talk." I learned then that when Adelaide said, "we must talk," she means then and there. We found a table in the basement of the lodge, and with a few other kindred spirits from relatively small foundations in the philanthropic world, we talked and talked and talked. And Adelaide said, "This is a teachable moment. Let's send a message to the terrorists," she said. "Let's break our addiction to oil. Let's go for clean. Let's go for conservation. Let's go for homegrown energy. Instead of hugging a tree," she said, "let's hug an economist. Hug the one who tells you that fossil fuels are not only the third most heavily subsidized economic sector after road transportation and agriculture, but also vast inefficiencies. And let's go home," she said, "to this group around this table and make the best grants we've ever made, and the biggest. This," you said, "is no time to pinch pennies." Adelaide took the money. Adelaide puts her money where her mind is. And her mind that day was on fighting back for democracy. She set the pace. In particular, she and the Park Foundation committed $2 million alone to two of the most high-impact documentary specials Judith and I have ever produced for PBS. One called Earth on Edge, summing up the state of the global environment and anticipating global warming. And another called Trade Secrets, about how the chemical industry had kept from workers and consumers the toxic components of many of their prime products at the expense of human health and safety. That one landed the Park Foundation and our other colleagues right smack in the middle of one of the meanest fights, one of the most vicious fights we've ever had with a powerful industry. But not once then, and not once since, through a series of controversial broadcasts of strong public interest journalism, have Adelaide and her compatriots at the Park Foundation, including my great and dear friend Bill Moyers, who introduced me to Park, have Park flinched, backed off, or backed down. And Adelaide and Bill Samuel and Leo Hendry, they are kindred spirits of one of my best friends and mentors of all times, John Gardner. Judith and I knew him well when he was secretary of HEW and I was a White House policy assistant. I remember one long evening in particular in the summer when just the six of us, Judith and I and LBJ and Lady Bird and John and Aida, sat for a long evening of conversation on the South Lawn of the White House. And I remember hearing this rascally politician who knew how Washington works, and this marvelous former Marine who understood how ideas matter, talk until the evening turned to dark. And finally, late in that night, we went home. I learned from John that the best way to live in the world is to imagine a more confident future and to get up every morning to do something to bring it about. I remember him telling us, don't let the vast superstructure of civilization mislead you. Everything comes back to the talent and energy and sense of purpose of human beings. I came to know well the man who built meaning into his life because he saw no other way to achieve it. Meaning doesn't come in the genes, he said. You compose it. You compose meaning out of your own past, out of your own affections, out of the experience of human beings as it is passed on to you, out of the things you believe in, out of the values for which you are willing to sacrifice everything. The ingredients are there, John Gardner said. You are the only person who can put them together in the unique pattern that is your life. And yes, Jerry, he was a Republican. One of my White House colleagues said of him, he thinks like a saint. No, Lyndon Johnson said, he thinks like a good Republican. They're harder to find than saints. But one is all you need. John was the one. He saw the class war coming. He foresaw what would happen in America's egalitarian spirit if the excesses of money in politics were not curbed. He would nod knowingly, but sadly today, at the report that 30 zip codes in America have become fabulously wealthy, while whole urban and rural communities are languishing in unemployment, crumbling infrastructure, growing insecurity and fear. He would wince at reading The Economist on the eve of George W. Bush's second inauguration, well before the Great Collapse 4 years later, warning that the United States risks calcifying into a European-style, class-based society. He would be appalled by the political power exerted by a handful of financial titans, not only to avoid the penalties that the free market would have inflicted on them for their role in helping direct the economy, but to emerge with taxpayer bailouts to reap huge profits, while 30 or more million unemployed and underemployed people struggle to make ends meet. He would be sympathetic to the everyday people who turn out for Tea Party rallies to protest our failing institutions. Our institutions, after all, are failing. And why not oppose government if our political class has been bought off by the rich? I'll wager, however, that he would regard the Tea Party movement as a Trojan horse for its secret bankrollers, like the Koch brothers. And he would be shocked by the activist reactionary majority of the Supreme Court that has opened the floodgates for oligarchs and plutocrats to secretly buy our elections and consolidate their hold on the corporate state. One of our greatest Supreme Court justices, Brandeis, warned that you can have wealth concentrated in the hands of few or democracy, but you cannot have both. The pro-corporate Roberts majority looked at both options and declared, we'll take oligarchy. The founder of Common Cause was a prophet in seeing money as the dagger pointed at the heart of democracy. So Adelaide and Bill and Leo and all of you are the embodiment today of that spirit of resistance, that spirit of defiance, that spirit of democracy, which John Gardner articulated 41 years ago when he launched Common Cause. He would understand the dark reading of our gross national psychology that is playing out today. The human workings were the field of his study as a graduate student. And as Leo said, the Marine Corps was his finishing school. Semper Fidelis was his personal code. So I'll close with his words, as relevant as ever today for all of us in this room. We are treading the edge of a precipice here. There is a disconnection between the people and their leaders. Citizens do not trust their government, and a variety of polls indicate that this mistrust extends to corporations and the media. People do not feel they have control over their lives. And the sense of impotence grows like a great life-endangering tumor. Civilizations, John Gardner said, die of disenchantment. If enough people doubt their society, the whole venture falls apart. But he said, we must not despair of the Republic. That is our great challenge. Our founding generation feared the growth of great private power and private wealth. They had read history through the lens of tragedy and had seen that all of the ancient republics had gone through a sad cycle of degeneration. Anarchy, monarchy, oligarchy. And they tried to erect firewalls and safeguards that it would not happen in our time. Those firewalls, those safeguards have been taken down. It is our fight to put them back up and then to man them. That is what